reaction videos and shit. Yeah, hold on for a minute. Okay, good. So, what I was thinking that I should do. Sorry, I'm trying to work this shit out. Okay. So I thought we can do some reaction videos. Okay. So okay. Let's see, what should we watch about? How about video essays? Let's do the evil and
Hello everyone, and welcome to the 49th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Tony Soprano from The Sopranos. The first among many notable TV anti-heroes, Tony Soprano, in my opinion, is not only the first, but the greatest among them. This show gives us insight into the day-to-day life of a brutal and merciless mafia boss, and intermixes it with an in-depth study into his psyche through 87 therapy sessions that transform this series into 6.5 seasons of character study, a study that gives us perhaps the most complete and detailed account of a fictional sociopath in the history of the medium. The way that Dr. Melfi treats Tony in this series has been lauded by professional psychiatrists as not only accurate, but phenomenal, as a person like Tony would be near impossible to treat, and the progression of some of Tony's issues from crippling to nearly non-existent is a testament to how well written and researched this show is. However, The Sopranos doesn't fall short of showing us that the majority of the issues that plague Tony's psyche are near impossible, if not totally impossible to treat. And though he presents himself as a kind-hearted father, friend, and husband, Tony, when it comes down to it, is a self-destructive sociopath whose faults often supersede his good intentions.
So he's explaining that it's about a mob boss that does some evil shit, but he's a good father though. At least that's what all mafia bosses do, right? Do some. Well, if they're like a father, then they do some good shit, right? Well, that's what the show is actually.
It didn't necessarily have to be this way, and as we discover throughout this series, the influence of those closest to him, along with the traumas and
It's how, like, evil wasn't born, it was made. I think that's a perfect example on how it was made. Yeah, crazy, right? All right.
unusual circumstances he was exposed to as a child are much to blame for Tony's development of antisocial personality disorder. While that's certainly the case, Tony still made conscious decisions to tread down a path of criminality, and though he was thrust into a world of violence, power, and greed at a young age, he chose to remain a part of this world, a choice that ultimately molded him into the man we see in this series. In this video, we'll be covering every bit of what made Tony Soprano into who he is, and to give this video some structure, I've divided this video into 7 sections. Though these sections are distinct for the most part, I will be intermixing information we're given throughout the show that correlates between sections, and due to the nature of this show, I'll be jumping around between seasons quite a bit. I will be pointing out the good aspects of Tony's character, as well as the crimes that he commits, or orders, that are more or less morally ambiguous. But I must stress before we begin that Tony is still a criminal, and not just a criminal, but the head of a large criminal enterprise, one which makes him responsible for not only the crimes he commits, but the crimes committed on behalf of his organization, crimes that cause a great amount of suffering for many people. People like Tony Soprano are fond of comparing themselves to other people or organizations who commit greater crimes than they, often arguing that yes, they may have beaten, maimed, and killed a number of people, innocent or not, but there are far worse people out there in the legitimate and illegitimate worlds that have committed much worse crimes than they have. But pointing to another man who's killed 10 people and arguing that you only killed 2 is a poor argument to make for why you aren't so bad. And though there's always a greater evil, that doesn't negate the evil you sow or the crimes that you commit. Speaking of crimes, if you're up for solving some yourself in the comfort of your own home, I recommend checking out our sponsor for today's video, Hunt-A-Killer. A cross between an escape room and a board game, Hunt-A-Killer is an interactive murder mystery that's sent to you each month as a subscription box that contains a mountain of clues that you'll need to decipher to solve a mystery spread over 6 episodes. After one of her many true crime binges, my partner came across Hunt-A-Killer over a year ago when we were all stuck at home, and we've been hooked ever since. With the weather cooling down, we all need things to keep us entertained while we're cooped up inside. And if you're a fan of board games, escape rooms, and true crime, this is one of the best ways to keep you, your family, and your friends entertained for months, if not years to come. You're never alone when solving these mysteries either, as at this point, there's well over 100,000 subscribers and a thriving, spoiler-free community that can help you out whenever the evidence isn't quite adding up.
You know, if I were to become like a popular YouTuber, then I would be doing some sponsorships. That's all sponsorships do, right? make money from you, and then I think you make money from sponsorships. Interesting, right? Huh. All right.
A lot of fun, and you can start your journey to becoming a crime-solving detective right now by going to huntakiller.com/thevioli or by clicking the link in the description. And make sure you enter the code TheVioli at checkout to get $10 off of your purchase. Thank you, Huntakiller, for sponsoring this video. Now, without further ado, let's begin. Tony Soprano was born August 22, 1959, to his Italian parents John and Livia Soprano in Newark, New Jersey, and was raised alongside his elder and younger sisters, Janice and Barbara. Growing up in an Americanized Italian home as a Catholic, Tony was exposed to many of the stereotypical values and beliefs that came with this kind of upbringing, which includes a strong sense of Italian pride and community, a generally conservative outlook on social issues such as marriage, sexuality, family, and class, and owing to the time period he was raised in, a racist view of outsiders. Tony has been described as being sort of a class clown when he was younger, and while he began pursuing criminal activity at a young age, as we see in The Many Saints of Newark, Tony seemed to have more or less been a happy-go-lucky kid with a good sense of humor, and he enjoyed playing practical jokes on people whenever he had the chance. Though Tony dabbles in some of the criminal behavior that he saw his father and other family members engaging in when he was younger, before the death of his Uncle Dickie, it seems that he was largely uninterested in the family business and was instead focused on pursuing a career playing football, one that his Uncle Dickie supported greatly, while the rest of his family either ignored or dismissed it as a pipe dream. His performance in school suffered as a result of his mischievous nature and volatile home life, and while Tony did graduate high school and did attend college for a semester and a half, it would seem that his grades were far from satisfactory, and his performance in school was likely comparable to his own son's. Tony reveals during a therapy session,
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it,
Goddamn
just
bad.
by thinking about it. Meet Base
No,
44,
one time you flipping
a
off
complete
the
AI
one
creation
shit,
platform.
and it took
that he was a bit of a
forever.
bully in his youth as well, as him and his friends bullied a boy with a cleft palate, keeping him around and making him repeat phrases they thought were humorous as a form of entertainment. One thing that we're not privy to is whether or not Tony's legendary rage was prevalent in his personality during his childhood. And while I'm sure that it was to a certain extent, I think this lack of evidence indicates that it slowly developed over time, rather than being inherent to his character. Much of what we learn about Tony's youth is given to us in the form of flashbacks or through the testimony of others. And though Tony seems to remember his childhood fondly at points, it's quite obvious that Tony grew up in a highly dysfunctional home. Though that dysfunction can be partially blamed on the lifestyle that his family lived, much of the blame falls on the shoulders of his parents, both of whom had quite the negative impact on Tony's development, whether he or those around him are willing to admit it or not. We're shown what type of a person his mother was, and the horrible way she treated her children, and we'll cover her in a moment. But first, let's talk about his father, a man who we're not often given an unbiased view of. To Tony's friends, family, and business associates, his father was seen as a good-natured, stand-up guy. While that may have been true in a sense, Johnny Boy, like nearly every male role model in Tony's life, was a gangster, and more importantly, a rather absent father and husband. It seems that more often than not, if he wasn't out plying his trade, he was at his mistress's house, and the only time he would perform his duties as a father or a husband were the scant few moments when he was at home, where he would check in on his family to deliver punishment and give a half-hearted lesson to his kids before leaving again. Johnny was the kind of father who expected his kids to act, look, and behave a certain way, but he was never around to ensure that his kids grew up the way he wanted them to. Instead, he would yell and hit, and then make amends with money or possessions before leaving again, leaving his children contemplating lessons that were given swiftly, giving them nothing consistent to build upon. A great example of this is given to us in The Many Saints of Newark after Johnny returns home from prison. Here, he states to his brother that all he wanted to do was have sex with his mistress and go to sleep, and could care less about visiting his family. He then berates his wife for not informing him that African Americans had moved into the neighborhood, and chastises his daughter for her choice of clothing. And later in the evening, after the party, before leaving the house to presumably meet his mistress, he hands his son some money to buy burgers, assuming, like Tony often does later in his life, that giving money to somebody will satisfy them. There are